Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. This is Amjad Khan, OBE certified, and I extend a very warm welcome to all our participants in this second session of outcome-based education training. As all of you are well aware about the OBE concepts explained by the Dr. Syed Irfanullah in the first session last week, this today's session is mainly dedicated to the course learning outcome and teaching techniques we should adopt for achieving our course learning outcomes. But we will also first discuss some points related to education and OBE philosophy, stages in teaching learning process. We will also discuss the learning outcomes and the course learning outcome characteristics. Related to this, we will discuss the ABCD model for silos as well as the teaching and learning approaches to achieve the specified outcomes. So let's start our session by a simple question, and that question is related to that what does education mean basically. Education is defined by different people in various ways. Some say that it is the technique to train the mind of people. Some other explain that it is the transformation of knowledge and skills from one mind to another one in a specified environment. So on and so forth. There are many other definitions as well. But if we analyze all these definitions, we will reach to the conclusion that all these definitions leads to a single outcome, and that is the change. So education basically means to bring about change. Change where? Change may be in the knowledge of the students, the knowledge of the people, change in their technical skills, or change in their soft skills like communication, presentation skills, or it may be in technical skills in terms of computer, in terms of construction, in terms of repairing, in terms of engineering skills. So it covers all these three domains which are already mentioned in the Bloom's taxonomy, that either it will be the knowledge, which is covering by the cognitive domain. The second one is the technical skills covered in psychomotor domain. And the third one are the soft skills, which are covered in the affective domain of the Bloom's taxonomy. So this change cover all these three domains. Not necessary that all these three domains will be covered simultaneously at the same time, but any of these domain covered, that will bring certain change, and that is known as education. Outcome-based education is a student-centered approach. It means that starting with a very clear picture that what is important for our students to do. The outcome need to be defined in the beginning. And then organizing our instruction methods and assessment methods to make sure that this learning ultimately happens. So it is a student-centered approach. The outcome needs to be defined in the beginning very clearly. Then we need to apply certain teaching methodologies, approaches, in order to achieve those outcomes by delivery of those methods, by using those delivery methods, and then using the assessment method in order to assess that how much those outcome has been achieved. And this is the basic philosophy of outcome-based education, that the learning outcomes, the teaching and learning activities, as well as the assessment methods all focus on the ultimate outcomes. And these outcomes are already defined in the beginning. When all these three parts are these three different approaches focus on the teaching learning as well as the learning outcomes, and assessment of the learning outcome focus on the outcomes. So we must know in advance that what are basically the learning outcomes. Learning outcome focus on what the learner has achieved and can demonstrate at the end of the learning activity rather than the intention of the teacher. So the learning outcome basically reflect that the student must be in the center of all these three activities. The predefined outcomes, what the student should be able to achieve as a result of the teaching, already mentioned in the beginning. Then the teacher adapted different mechanism approaches in order to achieve those outcomes. And then at the end the teacher need to assess that how much those particular outcome has been achieved. The students need to be in the center, and the outcome need to be learner based regardless the intentions of the teacher. So rather than the teacher intention, we need to emphasize that how much the learner has achieved and can demonstrate at the end of the certain activity, certain learning activity. For this purpose, different level of the learning outcome has been designed, and you can see in the diagram that some of the learning outcomes are broader one, which need to be achieved after few years. Some of the outcomes need to be achieved at the end of the semester, while some of the outcome need to be achieved at the end of the class. Now, in this approach, if you can predict from the diagram that the program educational objectives or educational goals are long-term outcomes and need to be achieved in years. Program outcome need to be achieved after 4 years or upon the graduation of the student. The course learning outcome need to be achieved at the end of the course or when the semester get end. And the topic learning outcome need to be achieved after 1.5 hours of lecture delivery. So if we apply a bottom-up approach, then we can say that topic outcomes support course learning outcomes, while course learning outcomes support program outcomes. And in the same fashion, the program outcome supports program educational objectives. Here in this session, our main focus is on the course learning outcomes. The course learning outcomes definitely reflect that the program education objectives will be achieved if the course learning outcomes achieved. For this purpose, we need to know about some of the characteristics of the course learning outcomes. The first characteristic of the course learning outcome is the audience, or it must be expressed in terms of the learner. So we need to know that who are our intended learner, who will learn from us. Students will learn from us, or administrative staff will learn from us, or our colleagues are learning from us. So the course learning outcome first characteristic is that it must be expressed in terms of the learner. For example, we can say in the syllabus that upon completion of this lecture, student will be able to know, student will be able to explain, student will be able to demonstrate. So it means that our intended learner here are the students. The second characteristic of the course learning outcome is that it must be clear, precise, and must have a single interpretation. It means that we need to avoid vague words or those words which has a broader meaning. The third characteristic is that it describes an observable behavior. In the syllabus, we need to mention that behavior which we want at the end of the topic or at the end of the course. For example, we can say that the student will be able to explain. So this explanation is a behavior. This is observable behavior that we can observe. Or we can say that at the end of the course, the student will be able to design a web page. So this design is an observable behavior. Similarly, we can say that this course learning outcome must specify the condition under which this behavior is performed. So this condition is basically reflect a restriction or a limitation under which that behavior will get performed. For example, we can say that upon completion of this topic, student will be able to orally explain. So now this orally explain means that here we are imposing certain restriction or conditions on the observable behavior. The student need to explain, but how he will explain or how she will explain? Orally explain. This orally reflect a condition. And then the next characteristic is that it specifies criteria for accomplishment. This criteria basically shows the degree. It basically shows the standard, that how high is the standard of this outcome or this course learning outcome. So further we will discuss the ABCD model for the course learning outcomes, where I will explain it in more detail with the help of examples. ABC model for the writing course learning outcome need to be adopted because it reflects the audience, that who will be performing the behavior. It also shows the behavior, what behavior should the learner be able to do. C stands for condition. Under what condition do you want the learner to be able to do it? What restriction you want to impose on it? What limitation you want to suggest for the learner? Under those limitations, that particular behavior need to be performed. And the last one is the degree, that how well must it be done. So if we check definitely if you observe the A audience, so in our case the audience will be the students. So we can say in the beginning of the course learning outcome that upon completion of this particular topic, student will be able. So students are expressed in term of learner. If we check the behavior example, so for example, explain the principles of theory X. So this explain is basically reflect the behavior. Or we can say that evaluate the strength and weaknesses of ABC. So this evaluation reflect an observable behavior. For this reason, we need to use the action verb, like the action verbs need to be specific, need to be observable, need to be measurable and achievable. Here explain the principles of theory X. So this explain and evaluate reflect the behavior of this particular learning outcome. So far it's the matter related to the example of condition. So condition is the restriction or limitation under which the behavior is need to be performed. Now consider the same previous example, that at the end of this topic student will be able to explain the principles of theory X. So this explain just show the behavior. In this learning outcome only behavior is covered. But if we say that orally explain the principle of theory X, so then behavior and condition both are imposed over here. Behavior is already mentioned, explained, and orally is extra condition and restriction which is need to be imposed on that explanation. Or we can say that design a web page. So this designation or designing is just show the behavior. But if we also say that design a web page using PHP, so the usage of PHP is the condition which is imposed on that particular behavior. In the behavior here is the design. If we talk about the degree or the standard of a specific CLO, then it is the criteria of acceptable level of performance. Now recall the same previous examples that explain the principle of theory X. This just shows the behavior, but orally explain the principle of theory X, it is behavior as well as the condition. But if we show the standard or degree of this CLO, so orally explain 5 principles of theory X. So this 5 is the degree. It shows the degree. So in this last CLO, behavior, condition and degree, all 3 things are imposed over there in the CLOs. Our second example is design a web page, just show the behavior. Design a web page using PHP, show the behavior as well as the condition. And designing an interactive web page using PHP, so here interactive show the degree. Or we can say they design a dynamic web page using PHP. So that dynamic is showing the degree of the CLO.